In this session, we're going to take a look at EventSentry's scheduled task monitoring feature. So scheduled task monitoring is enabled by default for all hosts that are being monitored. And you can find this, of course, under System Health, Scheduled Tasks. If we click the object here, we have the Scheduled Tasks dialog here. Now, what can we do with this feature? There's two things we can do with scheduled task monitoring. The first thing we can do is we can monitor scheduled tasks to determine any sort of changes that are occurring. So if somebody adds, removes, or changes a scheduled task, then EventSentry can detect that change and will log it not only to the event log, but also to the database. So you always have a nice audit trail of all scheduled tasks. And that can be important because as much as scheduled tasks are designed to be used for legitimate tasks, unfortunately, they are sometimes abused by malware or intruders. So it's important that we know when scheduled tasks are being created or changed. Now, Windows does include some ability to also log changes, but EventSentry provides a little more detail there, and you're not so much relying on group policy settings, etc., to make sure this is actually configured. And the other thing you can do with scheduled task monitoring is you get a complete inventory of all scheduled tasks on your network. And this is particularly powerful when you use the EventSentry web reports to view and work with this inventory, because it becomes very, very easy to not only see all of the scheduled tasks that are actually present on your network, and that means on all your domain controllers, servers, workstations, but you can also easily filter out these scheduled tasks. So you can immediately, with just a few clicks, see, okay, which scheduled tasks are running under my user account, are running under a domain admin account, and so forth. But we'll get into that towards the end of this session. So coming back to this dialog, let's go from top to bottom. So first we configure the refresh interval. So this is not something that's done in real time. Instead, the EventSentry agent that's running on each monitored host will inventory the scheduled tasks in this interval. So 3 minutes here. By default, you can increase or decrease that interval, of course. And then we can configure the severity with which any sort of changes are being logged to the event log. So if a scheduled tasks is created or removed, then there's a certain, you can configure the severity for that, or you can also configure a separate severity when a scheduled tasks is being changed. Now, scheduled task changes are somewhat common, especially ones that are created by third-party software, browsers, and so forth. So especially in workstations, you will see some frequent changes, and those can be excluded here. So again, this is very similar to some of the other features in EventSentry. You could either set it to monitor all tasks. If you say, I'll filter this out later, I want to know about every change that occurs. You can say, okay, let's exclude the tasks that are listed below. And of course, wildcards are supported, and you're specifying the full path. And then the last option is, of course, to say, okay, we only want to monitor specific tasks. So if you're only looking to monitor a very specific scheduled task that you are using in the organization, then you can select this option. But by default, we're monitoring all scheduled tasks except for the ones that are listed here. Ignore last result changes and time trigger changes. Those are, of course, somewhat frequent. So this is checked by default just to reduce the noise. And at the bottom, of course, we specify where we are writing the inventory to. So why is this inventory important? So if we take a look here at the task schedule of this machine, you can see that there are 59 tasks, and they're all listed down here. And of course, we can also go through that tree here and see them grouped a little bit better here in these sections here. But you can see this is somewhat difficult to navigate, especially when you consider that you have maybe 50, 100, or 1,000 hosts on your network. Right, so this isn't that helpful. This is great for creating the tasks on a local computer and for managing them there. But to get a bird's eye view, to get an overview of the scheduled tasks on your network, this isn't really that helpful. And this is where EventSentry comes in. So once you've configured this and it's deployed, you have the Windows scheduled task inventory available in EventSentry. So in the web reports, if you go to features under health scheduled tasks, we have two options, current and history. What we see here is the current list. And this is, similar layout as with the other features, with all the key properties of all your scheduled tasks grouped here. So we can already see here, we've got 45 computers being monitored, and here are the top 5 listed here. So a bunch of workstation servers, domain controllers in our EventSentry server. And yeah, just glancing here, just looking here real quick, we can see, okay, we have, for example, 7 different user accounts that are being used by all of the scheduled tasks, and 8 being used by the administrator account. Of course, in your network, you'll be seeing a lot more, probably many more user accounts and so forth. We can also see other properties, which scheduled tasks are triggered when you log on, which is triggered by a certain time, so forth, and which ones are, how many are disabled, queued, running, ready, and so forth. And this, of course, will change, constantly as these tasks are being refreshed. But let's take a look and say, okay, we want to know which tasks are running under the administrator account. Well, without EventSentry, you would really have to run a PowerShell script or something and query all your hosts manually. But here you simply click on the administrator, and we can immediately see, okay, so scheduled tasks running under the administrator account are running on these 5 hosts. These are the 4 tasks. So I don't even have to click on the details. I can already see, okay, those are the 4 tasks that are running. Some are time triggers, some are not. And other triggers are listed here. The last results, and of course, user is administrator. 7 are ready, 1 is running. If you click on detailed, then we can actually see the list of tasks here. We can see that the create explorer shell unelevated task, that seems to be pretty common and apparently something that's built into Windows. So we can go back here and exclude that. So if we say, okay, we don't really care about that. Now we're down to 3 tasks. And if we go back to details, we can see, okay, so one is the Mozilla, that's Firefox scheduled task that's been created. And the other one is a OneDrive task. It has never run, hence the last runtime is set to 1999. But that's really how easy it is to just get a quick overview and and drill down to find the relevant information. We also have a history of scheduled tasks. So if you wanted to see, okay, well, what has changed, for example, with scheduled tasks, then you can use the history page. And here we are, we're looking at the last 24 hours. We can see that there's far fewer records now, 19. And I made a little change earlier, actually. I went into the task scheduler and I disabled that Firefox background update task. So if we go back here and click on details now, we can see here, okay, there has been a change on the EventSentry computer. The name of the task is the Firefox background update task that I talked about, and what changed was the enabled setting, which went from 1 to 0. And that's a really great way to review all the changes that have been made to scheduled tasks on your network. So not just on one computer, but everywhere. So this is not only great for security reasons, of course, if you wanted to see, okay, was a scheduled task added, in case you didn't get the alert, for example, but it's also great for troubleshooting. If somebody accidentally, for example, deletes or changes a scheduled tasks, then that will be visible here. So when you're troubleshooting and you want to see, okay, well, what changed on the system, that change will be visible here. And just like with the other page, of course, you can filter this down as well to certain computers or certain tasks that you want to filter on. And that pretty much concludes the scheduled task monitoring feature. It's enabled by default. There's not a whole lot you need to do on the configuration side. If you want to exclude more tasks, then you can do that here if you get false alerts. And you can also, of course, exclude the alerts with event log filters. So just a quick look here. If we're looking at the EventSentry alerts here under scheduled tasks, you'll see that by default, the number of scheduled tasks are actually being excluded. And what's the difference, you may ask now, between tasks being excluded here versus tasks being excluded in the actual system health package scheduled tasks? Well, the difference is simple. Any scheduled task that's excluded or included here won't even make it into the database. So anything that's listed here will also be filtered from the web reports. Anything that's excluded simply up here as a filter for the actual alert, and those are some of the event IDs that EventSentry logs when scheduled tasks are being added, removed, or changed, then they'll still make it into the database. So the changes will still be visible here, just still show up in the inventory. So for example, this scheduled task will still show up in the database, but it will be excluded from any sort of email alerts you're getting. So if you want to make sure that you're keeping everything in the database, but you want to exclude the alerts, then you can simply go here to the EventSentry alerts package under scheduled tasks, pick any of the tasks. So for example, let's say, Windows Update number 2, you can make a copy, you can paste it here, you can call it my nuisance task, and simply adjust this and call it nuisance task, for example. Now that task will be excluded from alerts. You won't be getting any more emails from it, but it will still be showing up in the web reports.